May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Be seated. Always around this time of year, we end up with this story of the scribe and the widow, and the story of the widow's mite. And it is required that we begin with some requisite joke about people who have fancy seats and wear long robes with fringes and say long prayers and all of that. So that's the requisite joke. Of course, you and also know that this is also usually falling around stewardship time, so we have the story of the widow's mite, and is usually used to talk about giving money and about generosity. That's not today's sermon. First of all, what we should know is the scribes, despite the joke we love to make in pulpits that are made in pulpits all throughout the church, the scribes are not the priests. They are not the priests. The priests were their own class, their own tribe in Israel. The scribes were the learned men, and men they were. These are folks who knew Hebrew and knew how to write in Hebrew and Aramaic, in Greek and Latin and Akkadian. These were the learned men of their time. These were the folks who copied down the scriptures and the law of Moses and the words of the prophets. These were those who not just copied the prophets, but these were the ones who, in the stories of like Ezra and Nehemiah, these were the ones who shared in prophecy, who shared in the prophetic voice of calling, in warning the people of Israel about great danger and evil, and about lifting up the nation to be one of mercy rolling down like justice, as we hear in the book of Amos. These were important men. These were important men who were close to the seat of power, who in their own right had great power. They wrote the laws literally wrote down the laws of the land. The problem was, by the time of Jesus, they had become a rather corrupt lot. They had, as we sang in our opening, in the opening hymn, as we said, save us from deep resignation. But they had resigned themselves to the evil that they said they deplored. They sat in, if they weren't corrupt themselves, devouring the money in the treasury, they were turning a blind eye when it happened. This is who Jesus is speaking about. This is who Jesus is speaking about. Folks who wanted to sit in the seat of power, to sit in places of honor, but who found themselves corrupt or turning a blind eye to corruption and evil. And Jesus places that against the widow in the temple. Now, widows are powerless in first century world. Widows, they have no man to protect them. I mean, and that was the reality of the time. They had no standing. They needed the community. As the bishop said last week in her sermon, it takes a village, right? So saying to the unbinding of Lazarus, the rolling away of the stone and the bringing Lazarus out and unbinding him and letting him go to new life required the community. The widow herself was one who needed the care of others, who needed the generosity of others to survive, who needed the generosity and care of the community. And the widow is symbolic of all those in our community who need that love and that care. Think about it. We have the church home here in the Episcopal Senior Life Community, started as the church home for widows and orphans, because they were those who were the least in society, who needed care and protection. And so the widow, and the idea of widow and orphan, is something that is symbolic of those who are the least among us, needing to be lifted up and protected. Jesus sets the two against each other. Sets the two against each other. The evil powers of this world, which destroy and corrupt the creatures of God, and the children of God who need protection and care. He sets it up with evil versus good. Allow me to quote the great 20th century poet and philosopher from Long Island, Billy Joel. Shades of gray are the colors I see. It's easy often for us to want to be able to see good and evil, and sometimes it's really easy for us to figure out right from wrong and good from evil. But most of the time, the older we get, the more we know that I'm falling back into the song there, the more we find out, the less that we know. But that we live in that shade of gray. We live in that world, that in-between world, where we know that goodness in the world exists, and we also know that evil in the world exists. The prayer for today, the opening prayer for today, began with Jesus Christ came into the world to destroy the works of the devil, the personification of evil, to destroy the works of this evil by showing us the way of love. We have lived that way of love here at St. Paul's. When we think about caring for the least among us, as Water for South Sudan was founded here, where those who had no clean drinking water were able to get clean drinking water, because we were able, as a community, to care for those most in need. The church home is another example. Homeless families, through RAIN Family Promise, find the care that they need in the greatest time of need because of the generosity and the love of the community of St. Paul's and so many others. People are fed at St. Joseph's House of Hospitality, and so many other collections that we do throughout the year, whether it's for Veterans Outreach or School Number 9, those most in need are cared for. They are shown the way of love in a world that often wants to ignore them. As we live in this world where we know this battle of good and evil rages on, and always will rage on, we take our guidance from the words of Jesus that were not read last Sunday in the Gospel, because we had we had All Saints Sunday. But the Gospel for last Sunday was the summary of the law. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. That is the life that we are called to. That battle for good and evil rages on, not just in the world around us, but in each one of us. And the way that we can start to walk in the way of love is by holding up that mirror and looking at ourselves. looking in our souls, examining our consciences, as St. Ignatius said, to see the ways that we turn a blind eye to the evil that exists in this world, and to turn ourselves back into walking into a way of love. That is what the gospel calls us to walk in love. And what does that love look like? It's said to us in the letter of James, religion that is true, pure, and undefiled before God is this: to care for widows and orphans in their distress, and to be unstained by the powers and principalities and the evil of this world. That is the call of each one of us. That is the call of every Christian, to walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself for us, an offering and sacrifice for the world. Amen.